After my beloved Peachey died, I became demented with pitch-black grief. He died on the 21st of March, 2017, and his funeral took place on the 6th of April, 2017, in the Kensal Green Crematorium. My elder sister, Harriet, and I invited a lot of people to say goodbye to Peachey. Predictably, I was sitting in the front row between Harriet and little Jonathan. I always insist on sitting next to little Jonathan, whatever the occasion. He is my nephew. He is my late brother Adrian's son. Sometimes I address him as my boy, sometimes as my lovely boy. Harriet read a deeply moving address, which I know Peachey would have liked. When the curtains closed behind the coffin, I rushed forward with intent to open the curtains and hold the silver handles on either side of the coffin. But Harriet and little Jonathan put every effort they could into grabbing my arms and holding me back. The visitors assembled in an anteroom where there was an abundance of flowers. I sat down on a seat and cried. My nephews gathered round me and comforted me. So did many other people, including my great friend Ian Maxwell, one of Bob's sons. I wept on his shoulder. The following day, the 7th of April 2017, I woke up feeling I was in hell. I lay on my back, unwilling to get out of bed, and finally decided to take an overdose. I told Mary, my housekeeper, that I planned to see some friends in Golders Green that morning to get her out of the way. I swallowed a vast pile of Valium, 10 milligrams, that is diazepam, and an equally vast pile of anti-anxiety pills called clomipramine. I had decided that in no circumstances could I go on living without my beloved Peachey. I fervently wished to die and hopefully to join him in death. I am not a depressive person by nature, but Peachey's death was so ghastly, so horrific, and so traumatizing that I irretrievably broke down. I put on a black suit, washed all my pills down with milk, and lay under the bedclothes, waiting for the Reaper to take me to Peachey. I put a copy of my will on the bed for all to see. I felt increasingly sleepy and therefore happier. Peachey's and my souls were about to be united. Obviously, I don't know what happened once I had sunk into a deep sleep. Mary sussed that I was not going anywhere near Golders Green, and she feared that I had taken an overdose. The bloody woman was right. She went into my room and found that I was breathing in a manner to suggest I was close to the Reaper's clutches. Instead of dialing 999, she rang Harriet up. Harriet rushed round to my flat and felt my pulse, which didn't appear to be working. She put her ear to my chest and was unable to hear my heart beating. She did everything in her power to restart my heart, and while she was struggling to bring me back to life, Mary came into the room in a state of shock, and she shouted, "Dial 999. Harriet replied, "I'm trying to restart her heart. I've only got one miserable pair of hands. You dial 999. Mary had also phoned my GP, Dr. Guy State, who accompanied Harriet and me to St. Thomas's Hospital in an ambulance. First, I was taken to intensive care, where I stayed for several nights. I was then put onto a ward with various other fuckers. I began to have terrible hallucinations. I imagined things that were not happening, and I heard hostile voices, as a paranoid schizophrenic does. According to my doctors, this was because the sheer weight of the pills I had taken was pressing against the part of my brain which generates fear, phobias, and negative thoughts in general. I don't understand this, but somehow it is said to happen. I failed to realize at the time that I was suffering from hallucinations. I later realized, only too late, that the charge nurse, who was later to call me a fucking whore, had certainly not done so. Very regrettably, I had reported him to the Department of Human Resources. I left a message on their answer phone, but I was unable to give the charge nurse's name. The ghastly hallucinations failed to stop. They were in the form of imaginary voices coming at me from all directions. At the time, I was convinced they were real. A patient by the window in the ward had visitors sitting with her in her cubicle. I thought I heard them talking about me. First they called my name over and over again. I tried to ignore them. The talking continued. I've got a copy of Help Me, It's read here. It's repulsive and depraved. Then I heard one of them say, she's actually used her own name. The same person appeared to read an extract from Help Me, It's read. She quoted a particularly risque passage about necrophilia, totally out of context, and said, I don't understand how Eleanor Berry is just lying here shamelessly. I hope she's thoroughly ashamed of herself. How could that tart write a book like that? These words were never uttered, but it sounded as if they were. The verbal hallucinations did not go on indefinitely, however. They were replaced by hallucinations of a different nature. I suddenly saw all the patients in the ward suffering from bubonic plague, all of them except me. I was terrified of catching it and locked myself in a lavatory. I thought I heard a voice saying, bring out your dead. After the plague came the fire, as it had in Samuel Pepys's memoirs. The curtains were pulled round all the beds as someone had just died. I pulled my curtains aside and looked out. In my deceived eyes, I saw flames licking all the curtains surrounding the beds from top to bottom. I reached for my mobile phone and called the fire brigade, giving the name of the ward I was on. Within about 10 minutes, a bevy of firemen bustled onto the ward, their hoses ready. There is something really appealing about firemen, with their earnest faces and their sweet little yellow hats. Blimey, this must be a blooming Oaks, said one of the firemen. There ain't no flippin' fire on them premises. They shuffled out of the ward, all of them looking pretty pissed off. A charge nurse, who noticed that I was in tears and that there was something wrong with me, led me by the hand to a private room. He seemed sympathetic at first. I was still in floods of tears about Peachey's death and the sight of his dead body. I imagined the charge nurse saying, if you don't stop blubbing, I'll tie you up and set fire to you, you fucking whore. I escaped from the private room when the charge nurse was looking the other way and tried to hide. The best hiding place was in a dying woman's bed. I got under her bedclothes while she breathed in gasps. There was blood on her chin, and she was making surreal gurgling noises like a poor soul facing the flag of death. The charge nurse saw what was going on. He pulled back the bedclothes, and I thought I heard him shout, come here, you fucking whore. I hurriedly put on my clothes and rushed out of the hospital. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was trying to find a taxi. Meanwhile, someone in St. Thomas's had rung Harriet up. She was quite cross. and rang me on my mobile. "What the fucking hell are you doing?" she asked mildly. "I'm going home because one of the charge nurses called me a fucking whore. The same nurse threatened to tie me up and set me on fire if I didn't stop blubbing." "Don't worry, it was only a dream. Go back to bed," said Harriet. Eventually, another charge nurse found me in the street and guided me back to the ward. There was yet another incident on the ward. This time it wasn't a hallucination, it was real. A priest was giving last rites to the dying woman I had got into bed with. I failed to observe the priest's clothing. I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Sorry to interrupt you, boss. Could you please come over and fix my television?" "Not now, I can't. I'm giving last rites," he replied patiently. "I don't care what you're doing. I don't want to miss Holby City," I shouted. The nurses at St. Thomas's are, in my opinion, rude, unsympathetic, and aggressive. The charge nurse, who had allegedly showered me with insults, shook my hand as I was leaving the hospital. "I do hope I won't have to see you again," he said, "and I hope I won't have to see you again either, or for that matter, any of the fuckers who replace you when you are relieved of your responsibilities," I replied. I added, shouting, "No one calls me a fucking whore when I happen to be a distinguished woman of letters with 21 books behind me, 2 of which have been translated into Russian. There is only one appropriate word to describe you, and that's a word beginning with a C.